Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel of Understanding Cultures. Today we want to talk about culture shock, about what is a culture shock really, and I'll give you more information right after the introduction. So what is culture shock really? Let's look at a good definition of culture shock. Definition of culture shock. Culture shock is a sense of confusion and uncertainty, sometimes with feelings of anxiety, that may affect people exposed to an alien culture or environment without adequate preparation. This definition comes from Merriam-Webster. So if you go to YouTube, you'll find many videos about culture shock. Normally you have some students that go to a different country as exchange students, and they are hit by a different culture than their own. So they start comparing the cultures. My culture at home is this way and the new culture is that way. So very much or very often they look at the differences of culture. And they say, well, I'm shocked by this difference, or I'm shocked by this difference. And they say, well, these differences, they are shocking, so it must be culture shock. But I think culture shock, there's much more to it. It's not just the differences of culture shock. Let me give you two examples here of these students that explain what they think culture shock is.
My name is Katie. I just finished my last semester at the University of Alabama and I am living in Germany. So I am excited to film this video today. I've been wanting to film it for a long time, and it's going to be the German culture shocks that I have personally noticed since moving here. Certain culture shocks are just different to me because I'm from America, so there's just certain things that I was used to and that are different here. I'm gonna start with Sundays. So basically on Sundays in Germany, a lot of things close. This is a really common one. You'll find most grocery stores and shops are closed. So in America, almost nothing closes. Sometimes places are open even on holidays. So it's kind of an interesting difference, but
culture shock with, and always was like, where do you want me to begin? It's just so many. In this video, I'm going to talk about top 5 things that I experienced in America that shocked me the most. 5. So number 1, Americans were on calories. So I never knew what diet was in North Korea. There was never such a thing called a diet. It was always good thing to be a little bit chubby, and if you were chubby, it's like a status symbol. You are not starving. So when I was in North Korea, So
culture shock is much more than just these differences. You go into a different culture and you experience these differences, but you experience not just the differences, there are different behaviors, there are different values, there are different belief systems, and you don't understand them. So culture shock has to do with a different environment than yours. An environment that you don't really understand yet, that you haven't learned yet. So we learn when we are small, we learn the values, we learn belief systems, we learn our traditions. And now we go into a different culture and everything is different. Everything is different than from my own culture, and I'm disoriented. I don't know how to behave here. I don't know what the values are. I don't know what the belief systems of these people are. So I have to reorient myself. Everything in daily life is different. So the food, the streets, the traffic, I don't know how to behave there, and administrative things are different. Going to the doctor looks different. Going to the marketplace and buying things, I need to bargain. I wasn't used to that before, so I have a feeling of loss. I have a feeling I'm losing control of my life because I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how to behave. And little by little, I'm disoriented. Culture shock has a lot to do with disorientation. Well, the longer I stay in this new culture, I need to reorient myself and adjust to the new lifestyle. If this doesn't happen, I still feel disoriented and I feel uncomfortable, and that will lead me into the culture shock. The culture shock is a time where my feelings where I start feeling that I can't cope with these things anymore. It becomes too heavy. It's so stressful on my daily life that I will just give up and give in and do not learn new things. Let's talk about the 4 stages or 4 phases of culture shock. The first one is the euphoria phase, or you also could say the tourist phase or the honeymoon phase. The second one is the culture shock phase. The third one is the acculturation phase. You also could say the adjustment or the reorientation stage. The fourth one is the adaptation or the stable stage. Well, the first one, the honeymoon state or the tourist state, we also talk about the euphoria phase. So the honeymoon phase is very typical for tourists or for people who are visiting a country with a different culture for the first time. Hofstede calls this euphoria because we are up high with our emotions. The cultural differences are new and interesting. Everything is very exotic and exciting. And one likes to explore these differences. Even obvious problems, different customs, understanding of time or space, eating habits, healthcare problems, or poverty may be acceptable out of our ignorance. Tourists or business people or visitors often have limited experience of these issues because they may live separated in holiday resorts and they simply ignore or do not realize these deeper problems. But after living a while in the new country and in the new culture, the new residents start to realize that things are more difficult than expected in the beginning. The crisis or the culture shock phase begins. One feels somewhat disoriented, confused, or disliked, and has often not fully managed the local language. Therefore, a feeling of helplessness appears, and one feels like a child, not reading or understanding intentions and actions of others. A sense of lack of control in one's life may lead to depression, isolation, anger, or hostility. The person in culture shock becomes tired of fighting against the foreign standards and starts to criticize the host culture and idealizes their own culture. At this point, people often withdraw from the host culture and tend to escape back into their home culture. Third, the adjustment or reorientation or acculturation phase starts. It starts when the individual has overcome the critical phase of the culture shock and starts to internally engage with the host culture. Prejudice are laid aside and a willingness to learn and to understand the new culture is explored. One engages in new culture and positively moves towards local people to study their values, their core beliefs, and their local habits. The person does not compare anymore their own culture with the host culture and does not see their own culture as better or as superior. Adjustment to the new cultures are made and values, core beliefs and habits are seen with a positive attitude. The new culture begins to make sense and one appreciates and adapts slowly to the local lifestyle, behavior and habits. The next one is the fourth, the adaptation, resolution or stable phase. In the adaptation phase, one has developed a positive attitude towards a new culture and is able to manage one's life in the new culture. It is also able to solve problems that arise. The person has started to manage the new language and is able to communicate and understand local people. Differing local values, core beliefs and habits are not seen as a threat anymore, but are understood and one is able to respond properly. Although the person will probably not reach a state of full assimilation, normal living in this phase will be possible. Slowly the person becomes bicultural, but needs to continue to be a lifelong learner of the host culture. Hofstede again talks about 3 different levels of adaptation. If you come out of this valley into the adaptation phase, there can be 3 different levels. The first level A is kind of, well, you're still criticizing your culture. There are still, back home things are much better again as here in the new culture, so there's still the point of critique. The second one is becoming close to bicultural, so where you adapt to the new culture and you can live a normal life and you have pretty well adapted to the host culture. And level C is you go higher up kind of, we call it to become or to go native. So you want to do or want to make everything really perfect like it's in the host culture. You even become more Roman than the Romans, so you want to make it even better, and you want to go native, and you adapt too much to the new culture. This is going so far that you even criticize your own culture back home, and you reject your own culture and glorify the new host culture. So the length of this culture shock period may be different. For some people it's much shorter, it can be just a few months. For other people, if they go down into the valley, it can take maybe a year until they really realize, oh wow, this is the culture I need to live in and I have so much trouble. I need to fight against so many things that I can't adapt. And so the culture shock will come after a year or 2. Well, in my life abroad, I've seen many people leaving the country who wanted to come for a long time, leaving the country after 1 year or after 2 years, because they were in culture shock and couldn't cope with the new culture. For other people, it may be much faster, you know. So it could be that they, after a few months, you know, so they go deep down, but they adapt very well and come out also very fast. So the length of this culture shock period can be different, just depending on the person and depending on the circumstances. Also, the intensity of culture shock can be different. For some people, it's quite easy to get into a different culture, and so they take it easy, and they may have a culture shock, but it doesn't go that deep, and so very easily they can adapt to the new culture and live their lives. For other people, it becomes very hard, and it becomes very difficult to cope with the culture, and they have to fight, and they go deep down into the valley, and even they can become sick, physically sick, because of a culture shock, and have a hard time to get out of the valley back to the normal state of living in that new country. I hope it was helpful for you to look a little bit at the 4 stages of culture shock and how to get in and get over it. And stay tuned, and because we will be looking at culture shock in the next 2 videos. First, we want to talk at different signs of culture shock. How do you know that you go into the valley, that you get into the culture shock, the signs of culture shock. And in the next video, we want to look at how to overcome culture shock. So if you're down there and if you try to adapt, how to overcome and what to do to overcome culture shock. So thank you for watching here, and if you like this video, please give thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I'm looking forward to see you again and talk more with you about understanding culture. Thank you. Bye-bye.